2015 and the National Government's Constituencies Development Fund regulations of 2016, that the National Assembly approves the list of nominees that have been appointed to constituencies of the National Government Constituency Development Fund. And this particular report, it is a report that was tabled as late as yesterday, November 30th, 2022. And owing to the fact that a couple of constituencies are yet to table or forward the names of their nominees that will be sitting at various NCGDF boards, we expect that this number will be rising from 103 moving forward to 290, which is the total number of constituencies under the 2010 Constitution. The House is later today expected to commence its long recess that will be sort of start from today to around February, when the House is set to resume. But owing to the matters before the floor of the House, we expect the probability of the House to be a sort of call for special sittings to probably prove key matters before. Remember, the remaining part of the vetting of PS nominees is currently ongoing in various departmental committees. The committees are expected to present reports on the floor of the House later today. We had various committees vetting various nominees to state departments, and we await to hear what various committees will be proposing in regards to suitability of PS nominees. There are a total of 51 that have been proposed to serve in various ministries. This particular issue had been occasioned by the lifting of a court order that allowed the Parliament and the National Assembly departmental committees rather to commence or continue with the vetting of the remaining nominees that have been proposed as permanent secretaries to various nominees. That particular exercise will be concluded by today, and we expect later, probably in the afternoon sitting, to have various committees give their reports in regards to suitability. And in the event that is not achieved, we might have to see issues to do with special sittings of the House at a time the House will be on recess. On matters, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission Bill, it is the bill that seeks to amend the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission Act for the connected purposes. According to the proposals in the bill, the IEBC will have one man, one woman, nominated by the Parliamentary Service Commission, one person nominated by the Public Service Commission, one person nominated by the Political Parties Liaison Committee, one person nominated by the Law Society of Kenya, two persons nominated by the Inter-Religious Council. And this particular bill is a bill that seeks to bring changes to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. A look at the memoranda of the bill. It seeks to amend the first schedule of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, number 9 of the year 2011, to change the composition of the selection panel that oversees the filing of vacant position in the commission. The proposal seeks to reduce the current allocation of the Parliamentary Service Commission, which nominates 4 out of 7 members to the panel. And the proposal will allow the political parties liaison committee established under Section 38 of the Political Parties Act number 11 of the year 2021 and the Public Service Commission, each to nominate 1 member to the panel. Signals at the chamber indicate the quorum has been achieved. I'll now hand you over so we could follow up on the live proceedings. Enjoy your viewing. My name is Gladys Mungai.
Yes. Sorry? We may now proceed. We have quorum.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers.
Honorable John Mutunga, Chairperson for the Departmental Committee on Agriculture and Livestock.
Madam Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Thursday, December 1st, 2022. Report on the Departmental Committee on Agriculture and Livestock on the vetting of the following nominees for appointment as Principal Secretaries. Number 1, Mr. Philip Kelo Hasama, State Department for Crop Development. And number 2, Mr. Harry Kimtai Kachuai, CBS, for State Department for Livestock Development. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Madam Speaker.
Honorable Kangogo Bowen, Chairperson for the Departmental Committee on Blue Economy and Irrigation.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Thursday, December 1st, 2022. The report of Departmental Committee on vetting of the following nominees for the appointment of Principal Secretaries. 1, Mrs. Betty Muthoni Njaki for State Department for Blue Economy and Fisheries. Mr. Kitonga Mukambi, the State Department for Irrigation. Dr. Paul Rono, State Department for Water and Sanitation. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Dr. Robert Pukose, Chairperson for the Departmental Committee on Health.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Thursday, December 1st, 2022. Report of the Departmental Committee on Health on the vetting of the following nominees for appointment as principal secretaries. 1, Engineer Peter Kiblaka Tum, CPS, State Department for Medical Services, and 2, Dr. Josephine Jerry Mburu Wahoko, State Department for Health Standards and Professional Management. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Vincent Musyoka, Chairperson for the Departmental Committee on Energy. You're next.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Thursday, December 1st, 2022. Report of the Departmental Committee on Energy on the vetting of the following nominees for appointment as principal secretaries. 1, Mr. Alex Washira, State Department for Energy, and 2, Mr. Mohamed Liban, State Department for Petroleum. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Peter Lachakapong, Chairperson for the Committee on Regional Development.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Thursday, December 1st, 2022. Now, report of the Departmental Committee on Regional Development on the vetting of the following nominees for appointment as principal secretaries. 1, Mr. Idris Dokota, State Department for the ASALs and Regional Development. And 2, Mrs. Teresia Mbaika Malokwe, State Department for Devolution. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
The Honorable Kuria, the Chairperson for the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Thursday, December 1st of 2022. The report on the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning on the vetting of the following nominees for appointment as principal secretaries. Number 1, Dr. Christopher Kiprotich Kipto, State Department for National Treasury, and Mr. James Muhati Buyekane, State Department for Economic Planning. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Julius Meli, Chairperson for the Departmental Committee on Education.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Thursday, December 1, 2022. The report of the Departmental Committee on Education and Research on the vetting of the following nominees for the appointment as principal secretaries. 1, Dr. Belio Kipsang, State Department for Basic Education. 2, Mrs. Esther Dara Moria, State Department for TVET. And 3, Mrs. Beatrice Muganda Inyangala, State Department for Higher Education Research. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
The Honorable Joe Ngeno, Chairperson for the Departmental Committee on Housing, Urban Planning, and Public Works.
Madam Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House. Today, Thursday, December 01, 2022. A report of the Departmental Committee on Housing, Urban Planning, and Public Works on the vetting of the following nominees for appointment as principal secretaries. Mr. Charles Hinga, State Department for Housing and Urban Development, and Mr. Joel Arumonyang, State Department for Public Works. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
The Honorable John Mutunga, Chairperson for the Departmental Committee on Agriculture and Livestock.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I beg to move the notice of motion that this House adopts the report of the Departmental Committee on Agriculture and Livestock on the vetting of nominees for appointment as principal secretaries, laid on the table of the House of Thursday, December 1st, 2022, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 155(3)(b) of the Constitution, approves the appointment of the following persons as principal secretaries. Number 1, Mr. Philip Kelo Hasama, State Department for Crop Development. And number 2, Madam Speaker, Mr. Hilary Kimtai Kachuai, CBS, State Department for Livestock Development. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Kangogo Bowen, Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Blue Economy and Irrigation.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Taking into consideration the findings of the Departmental Committee of Blue Economy, Irrigation in the report of the vetting of nominees for the appointment of principal secretaries, laid on the table of the House Thursday, December 1st, 2022, and pursuant to the provision of Article 155(3)(b) of the Constitution, approves the appointment of the following persons to principal secretaries. 1, Betsy Mudhoni Njaki for the State Department of Blue Economy and Fisheries. Mr. Gidonga Mugambi for State Department of Irrigation, and Paul Rono for State Department of Water and Sanitation. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Dr. Robert Pukose, Chairperson for the Departmental Committee on Health.
Madam Speaker, that taking into consideration the findings of the Departmental Committee on Health in its report on the vetting of nominees for appointment as principal secretaries, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, December 1st, 2022, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 155(3)(b) of the Constitution, approves the appointment of the following persons as principal secretaries. 1, Engineer Peter Kiblagatum, State Department for Medical Services, and 2, Dr. Josephine Jerimbur Wahogo, State Department for Health Standards and Professional Management. Thank you.
The Honorable Vincent Musyoka, Chairperson for the Departmental Committee on Energy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to give notice of the following motion, that this House adopts the report of the Departmental Committee on Energy on vetting of nominees for appointment as principal secretaries, laid on the table of the House this Thursday, December 01, 2022, pursuant to the provisions of Article 155(b)(3)(b) of the Constitution, approves the appointment of the following persons as principal secretaries. 1, Mr. Alex Washira, State Department for Energy, and 2, Mr. Mohamed Liban, State Department for Petroleum. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Peter Lachakapong, Chairperson for the Departmental Committee on Regional Development.
Honorable Speaker, I want to give notice of the following motion. That taking into consideration the findings of the Departmental Committee on Regional Development in of nominees for appointment as principal secretaries, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, December 1st, 2022, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 155(3)(b) of the Constitution, approves the appointment of the following persons as principal secretaries. 1, Mr. Idris Dokota for the State Department for Asals and Regional Development. 2, Mrs. Teresia Mbaika Malokwe, State Department for Devolution. Thank you, Honorable.
The Honorable.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move the following motion, that taking into consideration I beg to give notice that taking into consideration the Departmental Committee on Education in the report of the vetting of nominees for the appointment of principal secretaries laid on the table of the House on Thursday, December 1st, 2022, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 155(3)(b) of the Constitution, approves the appointment of the following persons as principal secretaries. 1, Dr. Belio Kipsang, State Department for Basic Education. 2, Ms. Esther Dara Moria, State Department for TVET. And 3, Ms. Beatrice Muganda Inyangala, State Department for Higher Education and Research. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honorable Courier, Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to give notice of motion on appointment of principal secretaries. Honorable Speaker, that taking into consideration the findings of the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning in its report on the vetting of nominees for appointment as principal secretaries, laid on the table of the House today, Thursday, December 1st, 2022, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 155(3)(b) of the Constitution, that this House approves the appointment of the following persons as principal secretaries. 1, Dr. Christopher Kiprotich Kipto, State Department for National Treasury, and 2, Mr. James Muhati Buyekene, State Department for Economic Planning. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Alice Nganga, Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Social Protection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Thursday, December 1st, 2022. Report on the Departmental Committee on Social Protection on the vetting of the following nominees for appointment as Principal Secretary. 1, Ms. Veronica Mweni Nduva, State Department for Gender and Affirmative Action. 2, Mr. Joseph Magosi Mutari, State Department for Social Protection, Senior Citizens Affairs. And 3, Mr. Ishmael Mande, for appointment, State Department for Youth Affairs. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Yeah. The Honorable Alice Nganga, you may give your notice of motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Notice motion, Departmental Committee on Social Protection, appointment of principal secretaries. That taking into consideration the finding of the Departmental Committee on Social Protection in its report on the vetting of nominees for appointment as principal secretary, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, December 1st, 2022, and pursuant to the provision of Article 155(3)(b) of the Constitution, approves the following appointment of the following person as principal secretaries. 1, Veronica Mweni Nduva, State Department for Gender and Affirmative Action. 2, Mr. Joseph Magosi Mutari, State Department for Social Protection and Senior Citizens Affairs. And 3, Mr. Ishmael Mari Mandi, for appointment for State Department for Youth Affairs. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Next order.
Order number 7, questions and statements.
No, sorry, I think the Honorable Johanna Ngeno has not put his notice of motion. Okay, go ahead.
Madam Speaker, I wish to give notice of motion that taking into consideration the findings of the Departmental Committee on Housing, Urban Planning and Public Works in its report on the vetting of nominees for appointment as principal secretaries, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, December 01, 2022, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 155, 3B of the Constitution, approves the appointment of the following persons as principal secretaries. 1, Mr. Charles Hinga, State Department for Housing and Urban Development, and Mr. Joel Arumonyang, the State Department for Public Works. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay. May now proceed to the next order.
Order number 7, questions and statements.
What's your point of order? The Honorable John Gikaria.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am just wondering where, because you are also supposed to move as a committee on environment, forestry, and mining, and we were supposed, my committee did finish our report writing yesterday, and we are supposed to move it today. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Yes, as soon as it makes its way to the House, it shall be approved, and then you will be able to do that, to table it. Thank you. Okay, the Honorable Member for Thika Town, Honorable Alice Nganga. Use the next mic, the mic next to you. Yes, there you are.
This one. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I need to ask the following question. Could the Cabinet Secretary provide the status of investigation into the circumstances surrounding the mysterious disappearance of Mr. Derek Muriuki of ID number 2947092 and Mr. Lawrence Njeru on 29 June 2022 were en route to Nairobi, Turkana County, where aboard motor vehicle KCZ 057W, which was later found abandoned a few meters from Sagal Police Station, reported at Sagal Police Station OB number 0183006-2022, and at Kasarani Police Station OB number 9797-2022 respectively. Could the Cabinet Secretary provide the measures put into place to guarantee security for the immediate family members of the above-mentioned person, considering that they have been receiving threats on their lives since the mysterious disappearance of their loved ones? And 3, could the Cabinet Secretary assure the affected families that investigation into the incident will be fast-tracked? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Member for Marsabit County, Honorable Naomi Wako.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I stand to ask the question 074 of 2022. Could the Cabinet Secretary provide a status report on the electricity connectivity to public institutions and households in Marsabit County, indicating the percentage of the said connectivity of these facilities? Number 2, could the Cabinet Secretary elaborate the plans to put in place by the Ministry to ensure that Marsabit County is connected to the electricity power through the national grid? Number 3, could the Cabinet Secretary explain the cause of frequent power outages in Marsabit County and provide the steps taken by the Ministry to address the said outages? Number 4, could the Cabinet Secretary explain whether Kenya Power and Lighting Company adheres to the due process of issuing power interruption notices in Marsabit County before the power outage occurs? The last, could the Cabinet Secretary provide the operational capacity of Kenya Power and Lighting Company to adequately supply power in the county. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Limuru.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to ask a question to the Cabinet Secretary for Environment and Forestry. One, mountains. Could the Cabinet Secretary provide seismic status of Limuru area and its surroundings, as well as data on the frequency of earth tremors? Two, could the Cabinet Secretary provide the measures that the government has put in place to ensure the design and construction of critical infrastructure in earthquake-prone areas can withstand structural challenges related to tremors? Three, could the Cabinet Secretary provide details and contacts of key institutions responsible for measuring, monitoring, and reporting on such tremors and indicate the country's capacity to undertake such exercises? Four, could the Cabinet Secretary explain emergency awareness programs available in earthquake-prone areas for members of the public to ensure that they are advised on necessary actions to take in case of disaster related to earthquakes? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Statement by the member for Marsabit County, Honorable Naomi Wako.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honorable Speaker, pursuant to the provisions of the Standing Order 44.2C, I seek to request a statement from the chairperson of the Departmental Committee on the Administration and Internal Affairs regarding the delay in issuance of national identity cards to the new applicants in Marsabit County. Honorable Speaker, the predicament faced by the new applicants in obtaining identity cards due to their ethnicity is so discriminatory and further demonstrates how the delay may endanger the well-being of the applicants and their families. As a result, traveling to other parts of the country becomes a challenge due to lack of an identity card, which is a mandatory pass at the various police checkpoints along Moyale-Isiolo Road. Honorable Speaker, majority of school leavers in Marsabit County seeking identity cards to apply for university, college, or other education and funding by the Higher Education Loans Board have experienced prolonged delayed in issuance of the national identity cards. Consequently, student identity card negates the university provision, which states that students must identify themselves by providing identity cards whenever required. Moreover, those applying to replace lost or misplaced cards are also forced to wait for long before they can be issued with new cards. Honorable Speaker, it is against this background that I seek a statement from the Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Administration and Internal Affairs on the following. Could the Chairperson explain why there has been a delay in issuance of identity cards to the new applicants from Marsabit County? Number two, what measures is the ministry putting in place to ensure that the new applicants obtain identity cards? I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
The Honorable John Kiarie, Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Communication, Information and Innovation. We are just having a slight variation to the order paper. We allow you to lay the paper and to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Thursday, December 1, 2022. This is the report of the Departmental Committee on Communication, Information and Innovation on the vetting of the following nominees for appointment as principal secretaries. 1, Professor Edward Waswa Kisiangani to the State Department for Broadcasting and Telecommunication. And 2, Engineer John Kipchumba Tanui to the State Department for Information, Communication, Technology, and Digital Economy. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
You may proceed to move your motion.
Madam Speaker, I rise to give a notice of motion, and this is the notice of motion. The motion is the appointment of principal secretaries, that taking into consideration the findings of the Departmental Committee on Communication, Information and Innovation in its report on the vetting of nominees for appointment as principal secretaries laid on the table of the House on Thursday, December 1, 2022, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 155(3)(b) of the Constitution, approves the appointment of the following persons as principal secretaries. 1, Professor Edward Waswa Kisiangani to the State Department for Broadcasting and Telecommunication. And 2, Engineer John Kipchumba Tanui to the State Department for ICT and Digital Economy. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Next order. Honorable members, we will be moving to order number 9 and then to number 10. We shall skip order number 8, but we shall come back to it thereafter. Next order.
Order number 9, motion. Approval of nominees to various national government constituency development fund committees. Question to be put.
Honorable members, I now put the question that this House adopts the report of the Select Committee on the National Government Constituencies Development Fund laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, November 29th, 2022, and pursuant to the provisions of Section 43(4), the National Government Constituency Development Fund Act of 2015, and paragraphs 5(2) and 10 of the National Government Constituencies Development Fund Regulations 2016, approves the list of nominees for the appointment to the following 103 constituency committees of the National Government Constituency Development Fund as listed in pages 494 to 541 as in the order paper. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. And will as many of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Order number 10, motion. Sessional paper number 2 of 2021 on the National Agricultural Policy. Question to be put.
Honorable members, I now put the question that this House adopts sessional paper number 2 of 2021 on the National Agricultural Policy laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, February 8, 2022. Will as many of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. We now move back to order number 8.
Order number 8, motion. Report of the Committee of the Whole House on the County Government's Additional Allocations number 2 Bill, Senate Bill number 4 of 2022. Question to be put and third reading.
Honorable members, before I proceed to put the question, for the agreement with the report of the Committee of the Whole House on this particular bill, I wish to state that my attention has been drawn to a certain procedural lapse that took place yesterday afternoon during the consideration of the bill at the Committee of the Whole House stage. It is notable that the county government's additional allocations number 2 bill and Senate Bill number 4 of 2022 is a form of an annual appropriations bill seeking to allocate certain conditional funds to specified county governments. As such, it is a money bill. Honorable members, Article 114, 2, and 3 of the Constitution with respect to money motions provides, and I quote, if in the opinion of the Speaker of the National Assembly, a motion makes provision for a matter listed in the definition of a money bill, the Assembly may proceed only in accordance with the recommendation of the relevant committee of the Assembly after taking into account the views of the Cabinet Secretary responsible for finance. 3, in this Constitution, a money bill means a bill other than a bill specified in Article 218 that contains provisions dealing with A, taxes, B, the imposition of charges on a public fund or variation or repeal of those charges. C, the appropriation, receipt, custody, investment, or issue of public money. D, the raising or guaranteeing of any loan or its repayment, or E, matters incidental to any of those matters. Honorable members, from the above, it is observed that before the House proceeds with the consideration of any motion with monetary implications, the relevant committee of the House, is in this case the Budget Appropriation Committee, must make recommendation after taking into account the views of the Cabinet Secretary of the National Treasury. As contained in order paper of yesterday afternoon, there were certain proposed amendments to the bill which were subject to the provisions of Article 114 of the Constitution. The amendments, which were proposed by the member of Mara, the Honorable Kareke Mbiku, CBS MP, sought to amend the first schedule of the bill to reallocate certain funds for the construction of county headquarters for 5 counties. Instructively, honorable members, it is observed that during the sitting, the chairperson of the Budget and Appropriations Committee pronounced himself as there being agreement from the committee regarding the amendment. However, I have not received any evidence, either by way of committee report or correspondence, to confirm that the consultations contemplated under Article 114 of the Constitution between the committee and the National Treasury took place. Honorable members, indeed, the report of the committee on its consideration of this bill, which was tabled in the House, recommended that the amendments proposed by the member for Mara constituency and others proposed by the National Treasury relating to the disbursement of court fees and fines to the counties should not be considered by the House. Honorable members, the intention of actualizing Article 114 of the Constitution and the practice that started in the 11th Parliament is to avoid whimsical amendments on the floor, especially amendments that touch on taxes and imposition of charges on a public fund, the appropriation of public money, given the possible far-reaching implications. Honorable members, additionally, it should further be noted that this bill that was passed annually, will be passed annually. As such, any matters that may have been left out can be revisited in the next bill once the requisite consultations have taken place. As your Speaker, however, I am duty-bound to correct the errors that fly against the Constitution, our laws, and the standing orders. Article 114 limitations on the amendments proposed by the member for Mara was not lifted before consideration of the Committee of the Whole House yesterday. In this regard, honorable members, I therefore direct as follows: that the bill be recommitted to the Committee of the Whole House immediately, that the committee shall resume from the point before the amendments were considered, being the first schedule of the bill. And secondly, that in future, the clerks at the table must ensure that the provisions of Article 114 of the Constitution and the practice that was started in the 11th Parliament on actualizing the provision as upheld when guiding the Presidium on all money bills. The House is accordingly guided. Thank you. Okay, in view of that communication, we can now move to order number 12. Yeah.
Order number 12, Committee of the Whole House.
You may be seated now. Order, honorable members, we shall go back to the business we transacted yesterday in the Committee of the Whole House. Order, honorable members. Honorable members who are standing everywhere, including Kaguchia. Honorable Kaguchia. I know you are a first-timer, but the rules is that when the chair is there and you hear the sound, you sit immediately, or you freeze where you are. He is a speaker of the County Assembly, former speaker of County Assembly of Nyeri, yes, understood, yes, but please, let's hear one another. Yesterday we had a small lapse in procedural lapse in the business, and the communication is already there. I got the wrong, I was there actually. Incidentally, I'm sure the chair of the budget committee also was misled. And on the basis of that, we transacted a business that ordinarily should have been transacted differently. We're reversing that now.
First schedule.
I propose the question that the first schedule be the first schedule of the bill. Order. Honorable members, please. Order. Does the budget committee chair wants to say anything? Okay. Do you want to say something? Okay. We're reversing that. I've already proposed the question. If you have nothing to say, I will put the question. You have something to say?
Yeah.
Proceed.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I thank you very much for your guidance. I agree wholly on the issue that it's subject to 114, and also on the whole issue of the allocation to the county governments. I want to say that going forward, of course, this kind of nature of bills, it is important that we consult even the National Treasury for their input. Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to bring this to speed because generally speaking, we may agree with the amendment in terms of trying to allocate monies equally to the 5 counties that are charged with building headquarters. But procedurally, Mr. Speaker, there is also another house to consider, in this case the Senate, and therefore, Mr. Speaker, having, and especially this particular bill, that Senate is actually going on recess today, Mr. Speaker, will put a lot of other businesses in abeyance, will put a lot of donor money in abeyance, and therefore I concur that we go ahead as you have guided.
Fair enough. Well, very well articulated. I now put the question that the first schedule be the first schedule of the bill. As many of the opinion say aye. As many of the contrary opinion say nay. The ayes have it. Honorable members, we have concluded that. I now call upon the mover of the bill to move reporting.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I beg to move that the committee do report to the House its consideration of the county government's additional allocation number 2 bill, Senate Bill number 4 of 2022, and its approval thereof without amendments.
Indeed, precisely. Honorable members, I now put the question, which is that the committee do report to the House its considerations of the county government's additional allocations, number 2, Bill, Senate Bill number 4 of 2022, and its approval thereof without amendments. As many of the opinions say aye. As many of the contrary opinions say nay. The ayes have it. We have concluded this.
I now call upon the chairperson to report to the House.
Madam Speaker, I beg to report that the Committee of the Whole House has considered the county government's additional allocations number 2, Senate Bill number 4 of 2022, and approved the same without amendments.
I now call upon the mover of the bill to move the agreement with the report.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I beg to move that the House do agree with the committee in the said report. I also request Honorable John Jogona Kawajiko from Kiaba to second the motion for agreement with the report of the Committee of the Whole House.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a member of Committee, Budget and Appropriation Committee, I second.
Honorable members, I now propose the question that this House do agree with the report of the Committee of the Whole House on its consideration of the county government's additional allocations number 2 bill of Senate number 4 of 2022. Yeah. Will as many of that opinion say aye? Will as many of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. call upon the mover. Mover to proceed to third reading.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And just for the record, and to put perspective, the matter in question was in regards to the construction of headquarters for 5 counties, which originally never had any premises to inherit, and especially from DC's offices or offices that existed before. The bill, as it came from the Senate, Madam Speaker, proposed that 4 counties were to receive conditional grants in that regard, because this construction of headquarters have been ongoing. One of the counties had been left out. Madam Speaker, it was the feeling that we also incorporate it, but also, Madam Speaker, procedurally, we thought also that we may delay other counties and delay disbursement of other funds, because as procedure is, this kind of a bill, it came from the Senate, came to our committee, then of course came to the plenary, and Madam Speaker, any alteration again would make this bill go back to the Senate, and if there is no agreement, we would actually proceed to mediation. Madam Speaker, with that in mind, Senate is proceeding for recess today, and therefore it will not have been proper to delay all the other processes and disbursement because of the rearrangement of the said funds. There was no additional funds. Madam Speaker, it was just rearrangement, but of course, it was subject to Article 114 of the Constitution, Madam Speaker, and having all that in mind, it would disenfranchise the other counties by the matter of delays. And therefore, Madam Speaker, it was important for me to put that to record and perspective so that we are all on the same page. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that the county government's additional allocation, number 2 bill, Senate Bill number 4 of 2022, be now read at that time. I also request the majority leader, Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, to second.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I beg to second. And Honorable Speaker, let me just mention that this additional county allocations bill is quite critical, especially for our counties, and many of our counties across the nation are waiting for funds, and especially those that relate to donor funds and counterpart funding from the government of Kenya. And as I indicated yesterday, about 5 billion shillings is GOK money, and about close to 17-point-something billion coming from donor partners that are funding especially programs in water and health that are quite critical. But let me also take this opportunity, Honorable Speaker, to ask our governors, both those who are serving their second term and those who have just been elected to serve their first term, that in the past we've seen a lot of wastage, even with donor funds coming to alleviate problems in healthcare and water, and ask all our governors to ensure that this 17.5 billion shillings going to them, a total of almost 23 billion, does not go to waste. I have seen a number of the new governors do a lot of good work, Honorable Speaker, especially in being able to rationalize staffing levels in their counties to make sure that their wage bills come down, to ensure that more money that is going to them from the national government goes towards development expenditure, Honorable Speaker. And I want to encourage them, particularly seeing the new governor for Kisii, who is a former member of parliament, and probably say something about members who have served in this house moving on to become governors, because they have been appropriating money to the counties. They know what it takes to ensure there is prudent utilization of public funds. And I want to commend the governor for Kisii and quite a number of other governors that I have seen do some good work in being able to rationalize expenditures in their counties. And I want to encourage others to follow suit, Honorable Speaker. Quite disturbing also are incidents in the recent few days in between governors and their assemblies, Honorable Speaker. And I want to also use this opportunity to plead to governors, especially the first-time governors, Honorable Speaker. I know when you get the term, Your Excellency, at times it tends to get to your head, and you don't listen to other leaders. And you want to belittle MCAs who are legislators in the county assemblies. Let us also speak to our governors and ask them to borrow a leaf from our president, who consults, who continuously engages with members of parliament in our parliamentary group meetings, Honorable Speaker, and even outside parliamentary group meetings like in the Hustler Fund launch yesterday, that our governors may be able to borrow our leave and engage with their county assemblies, both formally and informally, so that we see seamless flow of services to the people of Kenya without unnecessary squabbles, as we have seen in a number of counties. And a few others, Honorable Speaker, that we can already see smoke billowing somewhere. And very soon there might be trouble in a number of counties out of the attitude of a number of governors, Honorable Speaker. I don't want to get into the business of mentioning names, but I think they all know themselves and they better shape up before they are shipped out by MCAs. Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and I beg to second.
Honorable members, I have confirmed that we have the requisite quorum in the House for the purposes of making I now propose the question, which is that the county government's additional allocations number 2 bill, Senate Bill number 4 of 2022 be now read a third time. I've confirmed the requisite quorum, and therefore I now put the question, which is that the county government's additional allocations, number 2 bill, and Senate Bill number 4 of 2022 be now read a third time. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
A bill for an act of parliament to provide for additional allocations to county governments for the 2022-2023 financial year, the responsibilities of the national government and county governments pursuant to such allocations and for connected purposes. Order number 11, motion, approval of nominees to various national government constituency development fund committees.
Chairperson for the Select Committee on National Government Constituencies Development Fund, Honorable Sirma.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that pursuant to the provisions of Section 43(4) of the National Government Constituency Development Fund Act 2015 and paragraph 5(2) and 10 of the National Government Constituency Development Fund Regulations 2016, this House approves the list of nominees for appointment of the following 2 constituencies committee of the National Government Constituency Development Fund laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, November 30th, 2022. Madam Speaker, the 2 constituencies were new, which have come in, and we laid them on the table yesterday, and that is Ndhiwa constituency and Isiolo South. Madam Speaker, all the others we have been able to finalize, so therefore we have only a balance of about 3 constituencies which have not submitted, Madam Speaker, and I wish to urge those other members to ask their fund managers to expedite the process so that we may be at par in terms of the procedure we are doing. Madam Speaker, I beg to move. I beg to ask Honorable Kiarie to second the motion.
Madam Speaker, I do recognize that time is of essence, and noting the import of the motion that has been moved, I wish to second. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Honorable members, I now propose the question that pursuant to the provisions of Section 43(4) of the National Government Constituency Development Fund Act of 2015 and paragraphs 5(2) and 10 of the National Government Constituency Development Fund Regulations 2016, this House approves the list of nominees for the appointment to the following 2 constituency committees of the National Constituency Development Fund laid on the table of this House on Wednesday, November 30th, 2022, as listed in pages 543 and 542 to 543 of today's order paper. Will as many as, okay. I now put the question that pursuant to the provisions of Section 43(4) of the National Government Constituency Development Fund Act of 2015 and paragraphs 5(2) and 10 of the National Government Constituency Development Fund Regulations 2016, this House approves the list of nominees for the appointment to the following 2 constituency committees of the National Government Constituency Development Fund laid on the table of this House on Wednesday, November 30th, 2022, as listed in pages 543 to 542 and 500 to 543 as set out in today's order paper. Will as many of that opinions say aye? Aye. Will as many as of those of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Honorable members, I think we should continue to receive the reports from the various committees as they become readily available. I now call upon the Honorable Nelson Koech, Departmental Committee for Defense, Intelligence and Foreign Relations. Seems he's not here. We are now call upon the Honorable Samuel Chepkonga, Chairperson, Committee on Delegated Legislation.
Honorable Speaker, on behalf of the Chair of the Committee on Delegated Legislation, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Wednesday, December 1st, 2022, morning sitting. Report on the Select Committee on Delegated Legislation on its consideration of the adjustment of export levy for inflation made under the Miscellaneous Fees and Levies Act Regulation 2022, Legal Notice number 203 of 2022. 2, report on the Select Committee on Delegated Legislation on its consideration of the adjustment of rates of excess duty for inflation regulation 2022, legal notice number 204 of 2022. Number 3, Madam Speaker, report of the Select Committee on Delegated Legislation on its consideration of the statutory instruments, exemptions from expiry regulations 2022, legal notice number 214 of 2022, and report of the Select Committee on Delegated Legislation on its consideration of the statutory instrument exemption from expiry number 2, regulations of 2022, legal notice number 218 of 2022. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honorable Leader of Majority, Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, are you going to give on behalf of the chairperson? Oh. Okay, you know, just. The representative of the Honorable Chairperson for Delegated Legislation, you can now give notice.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to give notice to the following motion, that this House adopts the report of the Committee on Delegated Legislation on its consideration of the adjustment of rates of export levy for inflation regulation 2022 laid on the table of the House on Thursday, December 1st, 2022, and pursuant to the provisions of the Section 15(4) of the Statutory Instruments Act 2013, approves the adjustment of rates of export levy for inflation regulation published as legal notice number 177 of 2022. Additionally, Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice of the following motion, that this House adopts the report of the Committee on Delegated Legislation on its consideration of the adjustment of rates of excise duty for inflation regulation 2022 laid on the table of this House on Thursday, December 1st, 2022, and pursuant to the provisions of the Section 10(3) of the Excise Duty Act 2015, approves the adjustment of rates of excise duty for inflation regulation 2022 published as legal notice number 176 of 2022. Additionally, Honorable Speaker, I beg to give notice of the following motion, that this House adopts the report of the Committee on Delegated Legislation on its consideration of the statutory instruments exemption from expiry regulations 2022 laid on the table of the House on Thursday, December 1st, 2022, and pursuant to the provisions of the Section 21(2) of the Statutory Instruments Act of 2013, approves the statutory instrument exemption from expiry regulation 2022 published as legal notice number 214 of 2022. And finally, Honorable Speaker, I beg to give notice of the following motion, that this House adopts the report of the Committee on Delegated Legislation on its consideration of the statutory instrument exemption from expiry number 2, regulation 2 of 2022, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, December 1st, 2022, and pursuant to the provisions of this section of Section 21(2) of the Statutory Instruments Act of 2013, as read together with the revisions of Law Act Cap 1, approves the statutory instrument exemption from expiry number 2 regulations 2022 published as legal notice number 218 of 2022. Thank you, Chair. Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Member Nelson Koech, Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Defense, Intelligence and Foreign Relations, can lay the paper and give you a notice of motion. Okay, we can move to the next person. The Honorable James Gakuya, Chairperson for Departmental Committee on Trade, Industry and Cooperatives.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, let me take this opportunity to lay the following papers on the table of the House today. Reports of the Departmental Committee on Trade, Industry and Cooperatives on nominees for appointments of principal secretaries. One, Mr. Alfred K. Obudo, State Department for Trade. Mr. Abubakar Hassan, State Department for Investment Promotion. Mr. Juma Makwana, State Department for Industry. Mr. Patrick Kiburi Kiremi, State Department for Comparatives. 5, Mrs. Susan Mongeni, State Department for MSC's Department. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
You may give your notice of motion.
Honorable Speaker, I see your indulgence whether I can proceed by. Honorable Speaker, let me give notice motion for appointment of principal secretaries. Madam Speaker, that taking into consideration the findings of the Departmental Committee on Trade, Industry and Cooperatives in the report on vetting on nominees for appointment of principal secretaries laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, December 1, 2022, and pursuant on the provisions of Article 155, 3B of the Constitution, approves the appointment of the following persons as principal secretaries. 1, Mr. Alfred Kobudo, State Department of Trade. 2, Mr. Abubakar Hassan, State Department for Investment Promotion. 3, Mr. Juma Makwana, State Department for Industry. 4, Mr. Patrick Buri Kilemi, State Department for Comparatives. And 5, Ms. MS Susan Mangeni, State Department for MSCE Development. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Thursday, December 1st, 2022. Report on the Department Committee on Environment, Forestry and Mining on the vetting of the following nominees for appointment as principal secretaries. Engineer Festus Kipkoech Ngeno, State Department for Environment. 2, Mr. Ephantas Kimodo Kimani, State Department for Forestry. 3, Mr. Elijah Gitumbu Mwangi, State Department for Mining. Honorable Speaker, I also beg to appointment of a principal secretary to give notice of motion that's taking into consideration the finding of the Departmental Committee on Environment, Forestry and Mining in its report on the vetting of nominees for appointment as principal secretary laid on the table of the House on Thursday, December 1st, 2022, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 155 3 subsection B of the Constitution, approves the appointment of the following persons as principal secretaries. 1, Engineer Festus Kipkoech Ngeno, State Department for Environment. 2, Mr. Ephantas Kimodo Kimani, State Department for Forestry. And 3, Mr. Elijah Gitumbu Mwangi, State Department for Mining. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
You may move the motion. The Honorable Joash Nyamoko, Departmental Committee on Lands.
I thank you, Madam Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Thursday, December 1st, 2022. Report of the Departmental Committee on Lands on the vetting of Honorable Nixon Correll for the appointment as Principal Secretary, State Department for Lands and Fiscal Planning. Madam Speaker, I'll continue to give the notice of motion. For the appointment of Principal Secretary, the State Department of Lands and Fiscal Planning, that taking into consideration the findings of the Departmental Committee on Lands in its reports on the vetting of nominee for appointment as Principal Secretary, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, December 1st, 2022, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 155, 3B of the Constitution, approves the appointment of Honorable Nixon Correll as the Principal Secretary, State Department of Lands and Fiscal Planning. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The Honorable Sir George Murugara, the Chairperson, Justice, Legal Affairs and Legal Affairs Committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Thursday, December 1st, 2022. Reports of the Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs on, number 1, petitions for the removal from office of Juliana Cherera, Irene Masit, Justice Nyangaya, and Francis Wanderi as commissioners of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IBC. Number 2, the vetting of Ms. Mary Muthoni Muriuki for appointment as Principal Secretary, State Department for Correctional Services. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
proceed to give notice.
Madam Speaker, allow me to give notice of the following motion. That this House considers and adopts the report of the Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs on the petitions by the Republican Liberty Party, Reverend Dennis Ndwega Ndumbe, Mr. Geoffrey Lagat, and Mr. Ogwo Steve Jerry, seeking the removal of 4 specified commissioners of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, December 1st, 2022, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 251(3) of the Constitution, number 1, finds that A, the petition by the Republican Liberty Party discloses serious violations of the Constitution or other laws as a ground for removal of Ms. Juliana Woge Cherera, Ms. Irene Cherop Maset, Mr. Francis Mathenge Wanderi, and Mr. Justus Abonyo Nyangaya as commissioners of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. B, that the petition by Reverend Dennis Ndwega Ndumbe discloses serious violations of the Constitution or other laws, gross misconduct, and incompetence as grounds for the removal of Ms. Juliana Wonge Cherera, Ms. Irene Cherop Maset, and Mr. Francis Mathenge Wanderi, and Mr. Justus Abonyo Nyangaya as commissioners of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Number C, that the petition by Geoffrey Langat discloses serious violations of the Constitution or other laws, gross misconduct, and incompetence as grounds for the removal of Ms. Juliana Wonge Cherera, Ms. Irene Cherop Maset, Mr. Francis Mathenge Deritu, and Mr. Justus Abonyo Nyangaya as commissioners of the intro and violations of the Constitution or other laws, gross misconduct, and incompetence as grounds for removal of Ms. Juliana Wonge Cherera, Ms. Irene Cherop Maset, Mr. Francis Mathenge Wanderi, and Mr. Justus Abonyo Nyangaya as commissioners of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Number 2, the House resolves, 1, that the petitions herein, together with the material in support thereof, be sent to His Excellency the President pursuant to Article 251(3) of the Constitution. Number 2, that His Excellency the President appoints a tribunal to deal with the matters in accordance with Article 251(5) of the Constitution. And number 3, that His Excellency the President suspends the commissioners herein pending the determination by the tribunal. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice of this motion that, taking into consideration the findings of the Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs in its report on the vetting of a nominee for appointment as Principal Secretary and laid on the table of the House on Thursday, December of Article 155(3)(b) of the Constitution, approves the appointment of Ms. Mary Muthoni Morioki as Principal Secretary, State Department for Correctional Services. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Gabriel Tongoya, Chairperson, Committee on Administration and Internal Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Thursday, 1st of December 2022. The report of the Departmental Committee on Administration and Internal Affairs on the vetting of the following nominees for appointment as Principal Secretaries. 1, Mr. Julius Korir, State Department for Cabinet Affairs. 2, Ms. Aurelia Rono, State Department for Parliamentary Affairs. 3, Dr. Raymond Omolo, State Department for Interior and National Administration.
4, Ambassador Professor Julius Bitok, State Department for Citizen Services, and 5, Ms. Esther Ngero, State Department for Performance and Delivery Management. At the same time, Madam Speaker, I want to give notice of motion on that, taking into consideration the finding of the Departmental Committee on Administration and Internal Affairs in its report on the vetting of nominees for appointment as principal secretaries, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, December 1st, 2022, and pursuant to the provision of Article 155(3)(b) of the Constitution, approve the appointment of the following person as principal secretaries: Mr. Julius Korir, State Department for Cabinet Affairs; Ms. Aurelia Rono, State Department for Parliamentary Affairs; Dr. Raymond Omolo, State Department for Interior and National Administration; Ambassador Professor Julius Bitok, State Department for Citizen Services; and Ms. Esther Ngero, State Department for Performance and Delivery Management. Should it be seconded? I ask Mheshimiwa Wanyama to second.
It's not necessary. Yeah.
22. Report of the Departmental Committee on Sports and Culture on the vetting of the following nominees for appointment as principal secretaries: Mr. Jonathan Mwangangi Mweke, State Department for Sports and the Arts, and Ms. Umi Mohammed Bashir, State Department for Culture and Heritage. And at the same time, Honorable Speaker, I give notice of the motion that, taking into consideration the findings of the Departmental Committee on Sports and Culture in the report on the vetting of nominees for appointment as principal secretaries, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, December 1st, 2022, and pursuant to the provision of Article 155(3)(b) of the Constitution, approves the appointment of the following persons as principal secretaries: Mr. Jonathan Mwangangi Mweke, State Department for Sports and the Arts, and Ms. Umi Mohammed Bashir, State Department for Culture and Heritage. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
The Honorable Eric Mushangi, Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Labor.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Thursday, December 1st, 2022. Report of the Departmental Committee on Labor on the vetting of the following nominees for appointment Development, and 2, Mr. Amos Gadesha, State Department for Public Service. At the same time, Honorable Speaker, I wish to give a notice of motion on the appointment of principal secretaries. That, taking into consideration the findings of the Departmental Committee on Labor in its report on the vetting of nominees for appointment as principal secretaries, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, Article 155 3B of the Constitution, approves the appointment of the following persons as principal secretaries. 1, Mr. Geoffrey Kaituku, State Department for Labor and Skills Development, and Department for Labor and Skills Development, and 2, Mr. Amos Gadesha, State Department for Public Service. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
What's your point of order? Honorable Chairperson. Eric Mushangi, you may not have motion. Okay, so Sergeant Adams, maybe you can ring the bell for another 10 minutes.